You are listening to Trans Resistor Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Franz. My website is theageoftransitions.com. Please go to theageoftransitions.com to subscribe to Trans Resistor Radio. There is a feed for this podcast. You can subscribe through iTunes. You can also download every episode directly from theageoftransitions.com, so I hope you will do that. Save them for later. Listen to them anytime that you want. Also at theageoftransitions.com, you're going to find articles, you're going to find links, you're going to find videos that I've made and recommended videos to understand some topics that I think are important. And of course, you can watch my video, The Age of Transitions, there. You can also get a copy of my book, Revolve Man's Scientific Rise to Godhood, from theageoftransitions.com. I hope you'll check that out. You can at the very least download the first chapter for free from theageoftransitions.com. So check out the first chapter of Revolve through PDF at theageoftransitions.com. And thank you very much to listeners of Trans Resistor Radio. Be sure to check out proxpn.com, a virtual private network service provider. There's a link on my links page at theageoftransitions.com. Go to links or go to products and services. You'll see ProXPN in the right side there. You'll go to proxpn.com and you can check out their virtual private network. They offer a free service, so check it out. They also offer premium service, and you can get 20% off premium service. The coupon code, again, is on my links page. Check it out there. I'll give you the coupon code and the link to ProXPN. The reason to use virtual private network would be to use internet securely, safely. It's good to protect your identity. It's especially useful if you're on shared Wi-Fi networks a lot and you're doing some sensitive stuff online. You're absolutely going to want to use a virtual private network if that's the case. But it's good for a lot of other things too. So check out my links page and you'll see that coupon code and the link to proxpn.com. Also on theageoftransitions.com, you'll see banners to Amazon. If you click on those banners, it'll take you to Amazon. If you ever do any shopping there for anything whatsoever, when you click through my banners first, the shopping through Amazon will be the same as usual, but it'll just give me a small referral fee for referring you to the website. So if you're a person who does shopping through Amazon.com, what you can do is you can click on the banner through my site, then bookmark that Amazon page for later, and whenever you do shopping at Amazon.com, use that bookmark. And I thank you very much for doing so, because that does help me out. And of course, buying copies of my book, Revolve, helps me out more than anything else. So people who really want to support me, I hope that you'll do that. I know that many people already have. So many thanks to my listeners, to all those who appreciate what I'm doing. I appreciate the fact that you're listening. Today on Trans Resistor Radio, I speak with Adam of the Glasgow Truth Group. We have a conversation about the movie Cloud Atlas by the Wachowskis. I'm sure listeners are well aware of other Wachowski films. Of course, we have The Matrix, you have V for Vendetta, very important and popular films within the truth movement, within, whatever we're talking about there. They're very important films just in popular culture, too. So this is a Wachowski film that Adam, in particular, really thinks that people should pay attention to, and he has a lot of good stuff to say. So you are going to enjoy this episode of Trans Resistor Radio. Adam of the Glasgow Truth Group, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah. Now, we are going to talk today on the show about a movie that you let me know about this movie. You sent me an email, told me about the movie, and I watched it, and it is something else for sure. So there's so many things in this movie that we decided to dedicate a whole show to it today. What is this movie, Adam?
What is this film? Well, that is the big question, because it really defies any one explanation or any one particular genre or any one theme, really. According to the Wachowskis, the duo, Andy and Lana Wachowski, and there was 3 directors in this film, actually. The third one was a German independent director called Tom Tykwer. But according to them, the film is an exploration of how the actions of individual lives impact one another in the past, present, and future. As one soul is shaped from a killer to a hero, and an act of kindness ripples across the centuries to inspire a revolution. So that's how they describe it. And really, that really does sum up the film, I guess. But of course, the film is so much more than that. You know, there's so much more going on than just that. And every concept or every how can I put this? Every little detail in the film, you know, it has depth to it. Every plot device, every theme, every meme has incredible depth to it that can be looked at and interpreted and perceived on multiple angles, and that has multiple levels of meaning, significance. And I think for that reason, I would definitely recommend that people watch the film before maybe, you know, listening to the rest of this interview, because I don't think it's really going to make much sense unless you've seen the film.
Yes. Cloud Atlas indeed has, it's interconnected, as any good movie is with its themes. The themes all tie in together and they weave in and out. Hugo Weaving in and out.
Yeah. Weaving, yep, that's right. Yep.
No, geez, just that name we could get into, but
yeah. I know, yeah.
But what are some of the main themes here that really might be worth pointing out, or maybe some that folks would have missed if they watched the film?
Yeah, well, I think the film was really popular, at least amongst certain demographics or people with certain tastes anyway. It's very similar to the film The Fountain. If people have seen the film The Fountain, it's basically a film where you've got 3 time periods spanning roughly, I think it's 1,000 years or maybe 1,500 years, and one love story that continues across, you know, 1,500 years through the reincarnation of 2 souls in different lifetimes. And that's basically the same theme as Cloud Atlas. I think what most people will see in that film is predominantly a love story, or at least a number of love stories. There's 2 predominant love stories throughout the film that sort of start 500 years in the past and through multiple lifetimes, and sort of recurring themes continue into the present and hundreds of years into the future. And of course, one of the main quotes from the film, from the Sonmi character, who is a clone, who's been living in Korea, approximately 200 years in the future. She says, "Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others, past and present, and by each crime and every kindness, we birth our future." And I think that was one of the main themes of the film, and that's what most people, I think, will be looking at when they see Cloud Atlas, is the whole idea of a love story spanning, you know, hundreds of years, and the concept of reincarnation and karma and consequence and all of those types of themes. Everything being connected, everything being a result of something that's come before it. One event in the future being inspired by an event 500 years in the past. You know, it's a lot of different themes, a lot of different plays on these ideas. But I think the whole idea of a love story that spans across the centuries is what most people will get from that film. But there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah,
definitely.
And love stories can go. You know, it's funny, in popular music especially, I've noticed this concept is that a love song, a typical love song you'll hear, it's not, if you listen to it in the right way, it's not actually just like the male singer or maybe female singer, whoever it is, a male like singing to a female that he loves. It's actually the singer singing to like his God, and kind of like this realization of like this spiritual realization, this sort of like weird internal alchemical love song. I've noticed that with a lot of love songs, and if you listen to them the right way, they've got a lot of like symbolic language and things like that. And certainly if we're talking about a Wachowski film, it's loaded with alchemical symbolism and things like this. So what sort of little esoteric tidbits and symbols might we find in this film?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm still uncovering them. So, I mean, I can point out a few, and the sort of the parts of the film and the themes that I've focused in on personally in this. But of course, I'm going to watch the film again, and probably again after that, and I'm sure that I'll come across more as I watch it. But I think some of the things that stood out to me were the whole idea of a cycle, an age, the beginning and the end, sort of coexisting at the same time. The whole idea of revolution and evolution. Mm-hmm. I mean, the film starts out in 1843 in the Pacific Islands, in the Chatham Islands, actually, which is not far from where I'm from, and it's basically a bunch of white aristocrats who are running a slave trade. They're dealing with the Moriori tribes, who are cannibals, and so you've got this sort of setting at the beginning where you've got these cannibals on a Pacific island, and it ends in the same way at the very final, well, the most far forward futuristic scene in the film is again comes back to the Pacific Islands, and again comes back down to cannibalism again. Mm-hmm. And so the film starts basically sort of at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and ends post-apocalyptic. It ends in a post-apocalyptic setting, going back down to cannibalism again, and back down to sort of a pre-industrial, almost pre-agricultural setting. So you've got the idea of a whole age, a whole cycle, and within that theme, or alongside that theme, you also have the idea, of course, of a new religion, of a revolution, of a new age, and of a new religion. And the Sonmi character, who is a clone in Korea, and as I said before, I think roughly 200 years in the future, she basically is inspired by something she sees in the past. Well, something she witnesses a video recording of something sort of really, what's the word I'm looking for here? Something inconsequential, which to her has great meaning and inspires her to lead a revolution. And she basically becomes the sort of a female goddess for future generations. And I don't think a lot of people picked up on that, the fact that you've got a clone, an engineered being, actually becoming the leader or the icon of a new religion for a new age. And it's interesting because her name is Sonmia 451. And if you disregard the numbers for a moment and just look at the word Sonmi, and she's referred, historically as Sonmi. I think her real name is Sonmia, but other people refer to her in the film as Sonmi. Either way, you've got the words son in there. So you've got the son, S-O-N, the son of man, man's creation. You also have the sun as in the rising sun, which was typically worshipped, and was the sort of well, I suppose both in exoteric and in exoteric, religions was worshipped. And you can play around with the words Sonmia, and then you can get things like I am sun. I am the sun, I am the light. I'm also the sun, the product, the creation of mankind. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. And in one of these future scenes, in post-apocalyptic Hawaii, and I think it's 2321 or something like that, you've got this group of sort of pre-industrial tribal people who all worship Sonmi, and the priestesses actually have a sun tattooed on their forehead, the rising sun, which they associate with Sonmi. So you've got, I think that was one of the things that stood out to me most in terms of symbolism, was the idea of a clone being a goddess and being associated with the sun. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as Neo is the savior, Christ-like character of the Matrix, this Sonmia is the same thing in this film. Yeah, the
right.
sun. Yeah. You've got.
Oh,
I'm sorry. No. Go ahead.
It's interesting because there are some interesting relationships there as well when you think about the correlation between the Neo character in the Matrix and Sonmi in Cloud Atlas, and I'm sure we can go into this in further detail later on. But it's interesting because both characters are kind of they're basically just nobodies. They're sort of, just people who are working away in the system. They're part of a servant class, they're sort of totally oblivious as to what's going on around them. And then they have some kind of awakening experience, and with Neo in the Matrix, he meets Morpheus, and Morpheus unplugs him and he wakes up, so to speak, And in Cloud Atlas, the Sonmi character has a similar experience where she's basically just an automaton, but is inspired by the words of another one of her clones to start thinking independently and to start asking questions, which leads her to, greater, bigger and better things, and leads her to meet the leader of a resistance movement who wants to help her and save her, and who in turn, just like the Matrix, shows her the true reality that she's living in, the truth of her own existence and of the truth of the world, so to speak, as well.
Yeah.
So that's another correlation there, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's also interesting that she's a synthetic being, and also that she's female. So female synthetic being. It's the significance of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think. She is female, definitely, and she doesn't look particularly androgynous. But I still got, I don't know, the whole idea of I think you have to see the film really, but I sort of got an androgynous feel from it in some way.
Absolutely, yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and she was sort of like the, what do you want to call it? The alchemical hermaphroditic symbol for
the sort of the conjunction of male and female creative principles to make a more divine creature.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. The alchemical marriage. Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely a very, very powerful theme, I thought, and which was one of the things I've concentrated most on the film. I think when I'm analyzing it is looking at that particular idea, because I think that is extremely powerful, and I think it's extremely interesting, and I think it says a lot about the particular beliefs of certain groups of people, and perhaps the Wachowskis as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely, they're the ones making the movie for sure. So there's whenever anybody's watching a movie, it's important to think about who made the movie, who wrote it, like why they might have put the themes in there. But back to this character, the coming of a Messiah for a new age. It's typically this Messiah, son, god, or goddess character comes to ring in a new age and bring a new way of doing things. So that's exactly what's going on here, huh?
Yeah, that's right. She's the first. Well, they call her, the clones are called fabricants in this setting, and she's the first. Well, I think actually, technically, she's the second in this film. She's the second fabricant to think independently. She has a friend who inspires her to think independently, and technically, this friend of hers was the first one to think independently, and she was killed because she basically decided to rebel against her bosses, and that act of rebellion, despite its danger, inspired Sonmi. Another interesting thing is in the film, and I only got this after rewatching it again, is that the whole idea of a free-willed, well, at least a clone that has the idea to think, that has the ability to think independently, that was not an accident. I think most people watching that film and looking at its face value would see that as some kind of, and I think the way it's presented in the film as well is, basically Sonmi was a spirit, some kind of, I think you might refer to it as Christ consciousness, that whole idea. She was a spirit or a soul who basically inherited or manifested into the body of a clone, and that was why the clone was able to think, and think with free will and to act and to rebel. Yeah. But it's actually revealed in the film that both Sonmi and her friend who inspired her to rebel were actually an experiment by a resistance movement called the Union. It's not explained how this is done. It's not explained how they did this, but it's suggested at least that this Union rebellion, or whatever it is, who are interested in freeing the clones, actually somehow tampered with the whole DNA sequencing process. They somehow hacked into the clone manufacturing process and created deliberately a free thinking clone. And so this goes back again to the Matrix.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that people didn't see in the Matrix as well, as in the second film, Reloaded, when Neo meets the architect explains to him, using very fancy, flowery language, mind you, which is, I think, designed to basically confuse people. But if you actually listen to what he says, he tells Neo that he was actually a creation of the system. Neo was a creation of the system to fulfill a purpose.
That's
and to inspire a revolution, and that there had been 6 before him, and of course he also explains that what Neo believes as being reality, Zion and the so-called real world is just actually another level of the system. But I mean, that's a whole another story. But the correlation is still there. You've still got a sort of a hidden clue in there that's not really. It's kind of obfuscated in a way. It doesn't appear to be so at face value. But if you sort of really listen and really pay attention, in both these films, you've got the idea of the hero, the Messiah, the leader of the revolution, the one that changes everything, the one that saves us all, was actually created by the very system that it's hoping to topple, supposedly anyway.
Yeah, it's the whole slaves revolt, the freeing of the proletariat, the revolution of the mind. It's definitely a revolutionary idea.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So you were talking about Christ consciousness. I know that, again, this Christ figure being important messianic figure in the film. The idea of Christ consciousness is big within the New Age movement. Mm-hmm. And then, New Age, you're talking about the coming of a New Age, and the idea there is really to spur this sort of revolution in consciousness and freeing of the slaves. It's the same idea. It's about bringing about a new revolution for a new age to restart things. So the whole death, rebirth, the cycles, as you were saying. So this is we see this everywhere in the film. The cycles just keep spinning. Yeah,
that's right. It's all about cycles. One cycle inside another, inside another, inside another. In each cycle, playing off and feeding into the next, and each action being, a consequence of the one that came before, and apparently disparate and disconnected events actually being connected in some subtle way over the course of many centuries. And this whole idea of cycles and ages and again, revolution, evolution, the New Age, it's in everything in that whole film, in some way or another.
They even throw in the concept of the fall, which again, if you're talking about occult and esoteric mythology, the fall.
Yeah, the fall of civilization.
Well, it connects to the fall of Adam.
That's right. Yeah.
The fall of Lucifer also connects to it. It's all really the same fall.
The interesting thing about that is that it's not actually in the film. It doesn't actually tell you what the fall was. All we know was that it was an apocalyptic event which left the world ruined, basically, and presumably, and it's some kind of nuclear winter, because that's what it appears to be the situation. And it's hinted at, although this is not explained completely, it's hinted at the reason for the fall might have been something going wrong at a nuclear power plant, and because that is. One of the storylines in the film does revolve around corruption and conspiracy at a nuclear power plant, and a journalist who was trying to expose it. And again, it doesn't necessarily say that this was the case, but it sort of hints that what might have happened is that a comet or a meteor might have come down and struck this nuclear power plant. I think one of the little hints is the fact that there's the journalist who's wanting to expose the corruption and the conspiracy, presumably over a very dangerous nuclear power plant and the danger being covered up, etc. She has, this is the Halle Berry character, she has a birthmark that appears to be a comet on her arm. And so there's a few other little bits in the film, although I can't put my finger on them right now, but it seems to be hinting that that's what happened. So you've got the fall of something from the sky, Lucifer, was the fall from heaven, and also Lucifer was known as Venus, the morning star. So you've got the fall of a star onto a nuclear power plant, causing a nuclear winter. Mm-hmm. So that seems to be hinted at in the film.
Yeah, and then the fall of Adam being his split from divine grace into his lower state of sort of a dualistic state. So it's going from a more godly state to less so.
Yeah,
that's certainly the case with this fall, because civilization is basically destroyed.
Yeah. And of course, as I said before, that we end up reverting back into cannibalism. So we've got this post-apocalyptic setting in Hawaii with this sort of pre-industrial, almost pre-agricultural tribe living in fear of a bunch of cannibals who chase them and try and eat them. Yeah. It's like a fall back into the most primitive, base nature of our being.
Yeah, that's definitely there to show. What civilization and the progress of human civilization has done. It's taken us away from the primitive fear of each other, even, and of violently killing each other and having to ward off danger like that, into living a more secure life. So it's definitely pointing that out.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned something interesting that I hadn't noticed when I watched the film. You said that every scene shows one character or one group being subjugated by another. Yeah.
That. I mean, it happens to varying degrees, and in some scenes not so much. Well, in some storylines rather not so much, and some more so than others. But that definitely is a recurring theme, and that is one of the main themes of the whole film. Is recurring themes. It's of the same patterns playing themselves out over and over again in the past, present, and future, and all those patterns, being connected with each other somehow. But I mean, if you actually look at each individual storyline, what's happening in all of them is one group or one individual subjugating or abusing another, taking advantage of them, using them. Trying to shut them up, trying to stop them from being free, trying to stop them from doing whatever it is they want to do, So it plays itself out in so many different ways, but that was the common theme. That's one thing that all of the stories had in common, was that it was one person or group, demographic, whatever, being sort of, subjugated, abused, pushed down, controlled, manipulated by another. And Hugo Weaving plays a key role in this whole theme, because his character, obviously he has multiple characters in this film, because they use the same actors in each setting, to sort of represent the reincarnation of souls over many hundreds of years and different lifetimes. But Hugo Weaving, he's always the same character in every scene. He's always the controller. He's always the gatekeeper. He's the one. He's the assassin. Yeah. He's the devil. I mean, in the beginning of the film, he is presented as being basically a slave trader, and at the end of the film, he's transformed over hundreds of years into some kind of basically a demon or a devil, some kind of non-corporeal deity that basically haunts people and sort of tries to coerce them into evil.
He becomes the voice of evil in Tom Hanks's head, right?
That's right. Yeah, basically, yeah. He becomes the voice of evil, and it's interesting because that's one of the again back to recurring themes is sort of this whole idea of evolution from one thing into another. The Tom Hanks character, on the other hand, starts out as a thief, as an evil person, and over the course of many lifetimes evolves into basically a hero, the one who saves humanity in the end. Whereas Hugo Weaving starts out as a kind of an aristocratic social Darwinist in the slave trade business, and he kind of almost devolves into a spirit, almost a devil that haunts people and tries to get them to do evil deeds. So there's sort of a mirror image of one another in a way, and those two stories basically feed off each other. Well, those two characters at least feed off each other and sort of mirror each other from the beginning of the film right to the end. Yeah.
A lot of religious ideas in here. You got the concept of redemption for sure, redemption of souls, and it's possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
So all sorts of that going on.
Yeah, I mean that basically happens to the Tom Hanks character. He's basically a thief and then one of the very earliest scenes, and he sort of evolves, I guess, into a gangster, and and another scene, and another one, he ends up basically redeeming himself. As you said, what he does is he releases documents regarding this dangerous nuclear plant to the journalist Louisa Ray, and in doing so, he's killed for it. He's basically assassinated by the Hugo Weaving character, who's basically a hitman for the nuclear companies. So through this act of heroism, through this act of self-sacrifice, he's then appears to be reborn in the future as a sort of a simple tribesman who ends up saving the world. A moral man who at the same time is still pursued by the Hugo Weaving character in the form of a devil. So yeah, there's a lot going on in that.
Now it's funny. I know that you have pointed out the whole Wachowski Revolutionary Religion, and that's definitely being shown in this film, and maybe we'll get more into that a little later. But definitely, I mean, every theme is about revolution. It's about freeing of slaves. It's about the will, the power of the will. Definitely is big. So many things going on here. What do you think about? What do you think about the concept of the will specifically? I guess I don't know. What are they getting at here?
That's a funny one because I don't think they were really making any concrete statements about that. I think that idea was toyed with. It was just kind of explored and examined, the whole idea of free will versus determinism, or that whole dialectic. Do we have freedom of choice? Do we really have free will, or are we basically just are our lives and our thinking and our behaviors completely determined by causes or factors outside of our own control? Are we simply just a consequence of the things that have come before us? And that of course is kind of symbolized in the statement, the little poem that Sonmi basically reads out to inspire the revolution, and the one that is read out by a number of other people or throughout the course of the film. And that was the little thing that I read at the beginning of the interview here, where it says, "Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others, past and present. And by each crime and every kindness, we birth our future." So it's interesting because it doesn't appear to be making any concrete statements about whether we do actually have free will or not, but it does sort of seem to be saying that our lives are not our own, as it starts off there. We are inescapably connected to everything and everyone in some way, shape, or form, and the actions of others are what defines our lives primarily. So it's not it's kind of a bit ambiguous, that whole concept. I mean, I think it's explored, it's toyed with, but it doesn't really arrive at any sort of firm conclusions. Where, I mean, in a film like The Matrix, that theme is played on more heavily, and I think there's some more concrete statements and more concrete messages made to as to what the theme was there regarding free will and choice. Whereas in Cloud Atlas, it's kind of a bit more ambiguous, I think.
Yeah. This film is more about like not so much predetermination, but the sort of things that happen outside of an individual that affect them. So it's again, the interconnectedness of multiple people, whereas The Matrix is more about the what do you call it? The victory of the enlightened individual to overcome things and sort of be the hero.
Yeah.
But this is a set of heroes. And they're definitely different. I guess you could put the hierarchies of them in there, but I mean, when it comes down to it, they all work together. So maybe there's this concept of there's some concept in there of sort of the method by which one finds other people to spur revolution. Is that going on here?
Yeah, I think to a degree, yeah. As you say, it's much more. I guess I'm not sure what term to use here, but I guess new agey, for a lack of a better word. And they kind of toy with the idea of the quantum entanglement theory, multiverses, multiple universes, reincarnation, karma, each sort of individual affecting somebody else, or a future self across space and time, everything being connected, the sort of beyond the barriers of time and space, so to speak. Yeah. I mean, that whole sort of field of thinking is very, very tied into the New Age, and has been sort of mixed up and almost validated by various theories in quantum mechanics and quantum physics about what the nature of reality really is, and what we are as human beings, and what consciousness is, and whether it's whether we are whether there is something beyond all of this, and whether we are souls that are reincarnating, or whether we're just basically the sort of lumps of meat that the Darwinist view would have us believe we are. Definitely the concepts of secret societies are in there too. They have all these ideas are in there in a cult tradition. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I didn't really, and I mean, I wasn't really looking at that particular aspect of the film when I saw it, but I could still see, like, I mean, the particular esoteric beliefs and messages that certain societies and certain demographics would be interested in and been promoting. They're definitely in the film. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's for sure. There's no question about it at all. Mm-hmm. And again, we come back to the whole idea of the Wachowskis and who they are and who they are speaking on behalf of. Yeah, definitely. Because I personally have trouble believing that it's well, in the Matrix there were two brothers, now they're brother and sister. Yeah. But I have trouble believing that these two siblings were completely responsible for all of the depth that has gone into the Matrix and the Cloud Atlas, and all the multiple layers of meaning interpretation, all the esoteric symbolism. I have trouble believing that it was just those two that came up with all of this stuff and somehow wove it into this perfect script and this perfect storyboard. I think that there's probably a lot more going on there.
Certainly with a movie or any large production of media at all, it's always a group project, and people tend to forget that. You put a name on it, you put it's a Wachowski film, and then that becomes the name of the people who made it, and you're not supposed to go asking about who was the team here involved in, you get told about the special effects team, but you never really hear about the whole writing process so much. What I mean?
I mean, in this particular film, apparently it took them a year to write the script, and it was written by. I mean, I could be wrong here. Maybe I have to fact check this one, but I think the script itself was actually written by the Wachowskis and the third director, Tom Tykwer, who's a German guy. Yeah. They said that what they were wanting to do was transform this book into something that was completely genre-defying and boundary-defying, and something that was beyond anything, any singular explanation or any singular message or theme. And so apparently it was them that wrote the script, and they basically had in mind, they said that they would not be producing the movie unless the script was given authorization by the original author, David Mitchell, who wrote the book, I believe back in 2004. And so that's what I think has happened there. They're claiming credit for writing the script, and they said it took them a year, and whether that's the whole story or not, I'm not sure, but I kind of doubt it, to be honest. I think there was, in terms of the script and in terms of the storyboarding and the complexity and all the symbolism and all the amazingly huge, complex themes that have gone into that film, I think there was probably more than just the Wachowskis. You know, I think there was some other script writers and maybe some other producers in there who've had some considerable influence, I think.
Well, when it comes to reception of this movie, I know that it got a lot of good critical reviews, but it doesn't seem to have taken hold with the audience so much. Like, it's certainly not as celebrated as other Wachowski films like The Matrix. What do you think about that? Well, I mean, I think with films like The Matrix, I mean, that was a big Hollywood project from the get-go, whereas Cloud Atlas was an independent film. It was an independent director, and the Wachowskis worked on it with this German director, and it was only towards the end of the film that they actually got a deal with Warner Brothers to distribute the film, and it turned it into a commercial success. That was a story anyway, that started out as something quite independent, quite small, even though they ended up somehow being able to afford $100 million for it, which is making it the most, it is officially the most expensive independent film ever made. So, I think there's definitely a difference in the conception of the film, and I think probably the reason for why it's not maybe as popular or as highly promoted as something like The Matrix is maybe because of its esoteric nature and the fact that it doesn't make any clear statements or have any clear themes or messages. I think the themes in the film are so they can be simple in one way, but they're very ambiguous and complex in another. And I think purely for that reason, I don't think it would ever be as successful as The Matrix. I mean, even though The Matrix has just as many layers of interpretation that you can go into, I think the basic story in The Matrix is simple enough for people to follow, and there's enough action, and there's enough, CGI to keep people interested. Whereas Cloud Atlas, I think, it requires that you pay a lot of attention and that you give it a lot of thought, and that you really allow yourself to explore ideas while you're watching the film. And that's not for everybody, And I think that's probably the reason why it hasn't been as popular. Although it still has been, extremely popular among certain groups, it hasn't been the mainstream success that was The Matrix, Well, certainly with The Matrix, it had the new sort of special effects. It had like brand new special effects. It drew people in. It had crazy action, and these are the things that don't so much. I mean, even the special effects, I hand it to it. The special effects tie into the story they're trying to tell. However, when it comes down to it, it's all spectacle. And that's what the main audience wants to see is spectacle.
And well, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of spectacle in Cloud Atlas. I mean, some of the scenes are pretty astounding, but you have to really think, and you could watch the film once and come away with one interpretation of it, and watch it again and come away with a completely different interpretation of it, and come away seeing completely different things in each time. I think Most probably just the complexity of the film. I think that's probably has a lot to do with why the audience, or at least the sort of the really dedicated audience who felt really, that they really connected with that film and really loved it, I think was a lot smaller. So.
Well, the idea that it's independent film,
yeah,
that evokes a certain sort of response in an audience too. And
yeah,
do you think they're playing on the whole? It's an indie film, and that'll give a certain mystique to it.
Well, it gives it street cred, so to speak.
Yeah.
It becomes credible in the eyes of people who, feel themselves to be more artistically inclined and who have maybe not so much respect for or much interest rather in sort of big simplistic Hollywood films. People who like to think of themselves as having better taste or more sophisticated taste at least. I think there was definitely an appeal there that was quite deliberate, and due to the sort of ambiguity of the film, I think it played right into that. So marketing it as an independent film, despite the length and the budget, and the fact that it deals with all these complex, ambiguous themes which aren't quite clear at face value. I think that definitely had a lot of marketing power there. I think that had a lot of currency in terms of attracting a certain type of audience.
Now, what characters might we have missed when we were talking before? Are there any important characters or goings on that we hadn't hit?
Well, that's the thing. It's so difficult to prioritize or structure a sort of
something that was made like this, yeah.
Yeah, because everything is tied into everything else. And okay, we're focused in on Sonmi, the clone, who symbolizes a new religion and who actually does spur on a revolution or trigger a revolution or whatever. Yeah. I think just one other point that I'd like to add on to that before we look at other characters is the fact that Sonmi is actually presented as being a real legitimate god in this film, and that after she dies, after the revolution, after the fall, when we're sort of back to the basics again, back to the Stone Age in Hawaii, the tribal people there who worship Sonmi and who see her as a god, they actually channel her. There seems to be some kind of priest class there. The women are sort of the priestesses, and they actually channel Sonmi, and they actually get legitimate, real premonitions of the future from Sonmi. Yeah. And Sonmi actually gives them visions of things that do actually happen in the future. So they're kind of pushing the idea that Sonmi actually is some kind of god or some kind of omnipresent spirit. Not just the idea of one, but really one. Yeah. So that's something that people can think about, and I think a lot of people probably miss that in the film too, because they're speaking in a kind of a corrupted version of English, and it's kind of difficult to understand. But I mean that is very, very interesting. But back to other characters. I think probably aside from Sonmi, the Halle Berry character, or set of characters rather, of course, because again, we're set the same actors are playing, different characters. They're playing different versions of themselves reincarnated in different time periods. But the Halle Berry character, who plays a journalist in the 1970s trying to expose this nuclear power plant. Her name was Louisa Ray, and there's something to that name which I haven't quite figured out yet.
Well, you could have a ray being a ray of light.
Well, obviously that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the fact that she also has this kind of comet tattooed on her arm, well, not tattooed, but a comet birthmark on her arm. I don't know how that ties in, but it's sort of, I don't know. There seems to be some kind of correlation there, but also Louisa. I'm not sure what you can get out of that, but it kind of reminds me of Lucifer as well in some way.
Yeah. The falling comet being sort of a light from heaven falling down to earth. Yeah, that could be right. That could be right.
And and the in the future as well. I mean, the character she plays in the 1970s scene, is a sort of a journalist exposing this power plant. But in the future, after the fall, after the apocalypse, when she is a member of the last remnants of the technologically advanced civilization, who goes to visit the tribal people on Hawaii. Humanity's been divided in two again. A very common theme again, which popping up more and more in films these days, is the whole idea of a technologically advanced elite superclass, and a sort of basically a base tribal people of servants under them. But anyway, she's kind of the savior. She's kind of a goddess as well in some ways, because she exposes the danger and the corruption and the conspiracy and whatnot at this nuclear plant. And then in the future, she's also the one that goes to meet with the Tom Hanks character on this island and convinces him to show her the way to find a communications portal. And this communications portal is basically a means to communicate with, at this time in the future, Earth's other colonies. And because Earth has been ravaged by, the fall, the nuclear fallout, whatever, she ends up being kind of a goddess savior figure too, because she comes along with all this technology and finally puts Earth back into communications with its other colonies out in the galaxy, and allows for the last remaining humans to be transported off of Earth at the end in order to maintain the human race, because obviously we're all dying from radiation. So I don't know, that's a lot to take in all at once. And for people who haven't seen the film, will be going, what the hell?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Again, you really got to see the film. But again, so you've got the Halle Berry character, Louisa Ray, the whole idea of Lucifer, the fall. She falls down. She destroys the nuclear power plant symbolically through her journalistic actions, and at the same time, she has a comet tattooed on her, a comet birthmark on her arm, which is kind of another symbol for the destruction of this.
Also, the light bearer concept is that you shine the light in the darkness, and the darkness of the evil doings of the power plant. She's shining a light on it, so right. That sort of idea is brought out there.
And of course, you've got the idea of knowledge being light, and because she represents a technologically advanced race in the future, she's also that theme comes up again, because she is, she's visiting as sort of this tribe of pre-industrial tribesmen, but yet she is from a place where technology is extremely advanced, and so she's kind of the light bringer in that sense. So she brings the technology, she brings the knowledge to the people, and she lifts them out of the darkness in a way anyway. And she performs an act of healing upon one of the sick children on this tribe in Hawaii, presumably who's being, affected by radiation or something. She brings technology to save one of them. And so there's kind of the messianic act of healing there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through technology. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we cracked the case. Halle Berry is Lucifer. We figured it out.
Yeah.
Oh goodness,
it's quite interesting. Yeah, that's kind of I mean, that's kind of a bold statement to make.
Well, yeah,
but I still think I agree. I do. But it's still a bold statement to make. I mean, it's but that's the thing with Cloud Atlas. I mean, this is just one level of interpretation.
Yeah.
And there's so many others, and somebody else might have watched this film and gotten something completely different out of it. And I'm not saying that would be wrong and that we would be right. It's just
That's true.
There are so many different ways of looking at it.
It's an ambiguous movie as such. The point of it is to get the viewer to take what they need from it. So it's tailored to individuals, in that a mass set of individuals, in that it doesn't give you just one theme, like, okay, here's one theme that you need to take from the movie. It kind of gives you whatever you want to take from it. I guess that would be kind of like the point going on here, huh?
Yeah, I think that's I would agree with that, definitely. I think there's so much in it that you can take almost anything away from it, But it is still quite a powerful film. It's still quite evocative, and I think regardless of whatever messages you'll take away from it, I think there's a lot of feeling in that film, and I don't think all the messages are necessarily evil either, you know. And I think, I mean, like in the Matrix, I think there was, the messages were a bit more dark. I think they were a bit more concrete. I mean, once you kind of really get into the sort of the second and the third layers of interpretation of the Matrix, the messages are quite direct and they're quite dark and they're not very positive. But in Cloud Atlas, I think there's a lot of positivity you can take away from that, and there's a lot of kind of interesting philosophical and spiritual ideas that you can explore in that film, without them all being inherently negative, you know. Or dangerous, or insincere, or manipulative, or whatever, you know, like a lot of other messages and a lot of other films are, you know, designed to give you a certain feeling or a certain impression about a certain idea, in order to basically influence your thinking in certain ways. Whereas I think Cloud Atlas is a lot more abstract, and I think you can take away so many different things from it, and there are so many, as I said again, so many levels of interpretation and meaning in that film, that, you know, it's not the positive and negative or are very subjective in that film. I think the very subjective concepts that one person might look at them one way and see something very positive, whereas another person might look at it and see something very negative.
Yeah. Well, Adam, I want to have you back on the show again to get deep into the concept of the Wachowski Revolutionary Religion, which is a term, as far as I know, that you made up, that you coined that term. Right? Yeah, pretty much. I think I was just thinking about, like, what is it? What is this? What's going on with these Wachowskis here? You know, how can I sum this up? And I think Wachowski Rebellion Religion, or Wachowski Revolutionary Religion. You know, either one fits really, because that's kind of, we're seeing the same things, you know, appear in I think probably the three biggest films to date would be The Matrix, V for Vendetta, and Cloud Atlas. And they're arguably maybe the three biggest films in terms of anti-establishment themes of the past, you know, of this generation anyway. You know, of this generation, I would say probably the three biggest, most mainstream, most popular films that deal with anti-establishment themes would be those three films from the Wachowskis. So I think there's definitely there's something more to this, and I think this is part of I don't know, almost, as I said, almost a religion of some sort regarding, you know, humanity and what we're here for, and what constitutes positive and what constitutes negative, and the whole idea of heroes and revolution, and you know, all the other, you know, with the future of humanity, and the trajectory we're on, and where we are going, where we could be going, where we might be ending up. You know, all these ideas. I think there's definitely something that the Wachowskis are trying to get across to us in all of their films. Yeah, so it's definitely something that is worth talking about. It's something that people will be interested in, because, as you say, The Matrix and V for Vendetta have become iconic within the truth movement, things like that. So this is something that needs to be understood for what it is, and I think it was good that we did this show on Cloud Atlas too, because it's a film of the Wachowskis that's flown under the radar pretty much. So it needs to be pointed out too.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's funny because I don't know how successful it was at the box office. I know that it was definitely popular amongst certain demographics. You know, I think certain groups or certain people of certain tastes and certain mindsets will, you know, this film has been very popular with them. But as you said, in terms of, like, comparing to The Matrix, in terms of like a mainstream phenomena, you know, it wasn't nearly at that level. It was, I mean, it was promoted for a while. I think at the end of last year, I don't think it won any major awards and the Hollywood awards, but yeah, it definitely needs to be explored and examined, because I mean, even today we've spent an hour talking about it and we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to go into in this film, because again, it's 6 stories over 3 hours, spanning 500 years, incorporating just about every idea and concept you can imagine into one film.
Yeah.
So 1 hour is just, we've barely scratched the surface here, and we could, it would be great to talk about it again at some point.
Yeah. Now, before we go, Adam, is there anything specific, like any links or anything that you want, or that would help listeners, that you want to point listeners to here?
I would probably just say that, if people haven't watched the film, then definitely go and watch it. But it's going to take a few sittings to really get to grips with it, because it's so complex and there's so much going on that, if you just watching it once, I think would confuse you. Although you'd still see, some of the sort of more basic themes in the film to do with love stories and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, in terms, I haven't really seen any really major sort of like reviews or analyses of this film that have really struck me as being completely on point. I mean, there are some good ones out there on YouTube and on various websites where people will look at some of the concepts and the themes, and but not from the same angle that we're looking at it from. Yeah. Not looking at maybe the symbolism and the subtext and the unspoken messages in the film. They were sort of more dealing with the more overt stuff, the stuff that is apparent to you, immediately. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think people just need to maybe watch it and watch it at least 2 times, I'd say, and maybe think about. I think also, just in closing, pay close attention, because I think that the real gold in this film, the real meaning, that the big messages, the real significance is very subtle, and it may be only one line, Yeah. It could be one line or one scene that lasts a second that will unlock, a whole layer of meaning for you. So pay close attention to the script, especially the ones that deal with future settings, and the one in Neo Seoul, and also the post-apocalyptic one in Hawaii. So definitely pay close attention to the script, because there's a lot buried in there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited about talking about the revolutionary religion of the Wachowskis next time. We're definitely going to be doing that, and I want to thank you very much for coming on the show today, Adam. It was a lot of fun to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's been great, and I look forward to expanding on this next time. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Trans Resistor Radio. Be sure to go to theageoftransitions.com to subscribe to this podcast. You're going to want to do that, because next episode we will be talking to Adam again and learning more about those Wachowski characters, those little rascals, their rebellion religion. It's going to be very in-depth and interesting conversation, no doubt. That's coming up next week on Trans Resistor Radio. And as always, today on Trans Resistor Radio, I welcome back Adam of the Glasgow Truth Group. Last week, we started talking about the Wachowski film Cloud Atlas, and Adam had a lot of good things to say about it, so if you haven't listened to last week's episode, be sure to go back and do that. And then this week, we continue talking. We get a little bit more in-depth about themes that are present in all Wachowski films, what Adam calls the Wachowski Rebellion or Wachowski Revolution Religion. So I have Adam with me right now. Thank you for coming on to the show today.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure to be on again.
Yes, and last time, of course, listeners who listened to the last show will know that we talked about the film Cloud Atlas by the Wachowskis. Now, do you want to give listeners a sort of recap of what we did talk about?
Yeah, well, in the last interview, we were sort of looking at a lot of the symbolism of the film and some of the ideas that were being pushed. Obviously, as we discussed in the last interview, it's an extremely complex film with a lot going on. There's so many different layers of content, so many levels of interpretation. There's so many themes being all mixed in together into that film. So it's sort of it's difficult to sum up. But what we did is, obviously, people who have seen the movie, listened to our previous interview, was just concentrate on some of the more prominent symbolic facets of the film and the significance of those symbolic concepts. But I think today it would be interesting to talk about the correlation between Cloud Atlas and the themes that were included in Cloud Atlas. And how they relate to basically our society today, and also how they relate to other films that have been put out by the Wachowskis, and the common thread that seems to be running through all of the Wachowski films.
Yes, absolutely, because there is a point to this film, as people should note, and a greater point. So not only does this film kind of stand alone, but it ties into past Wachowski work. Is that correct?
I would say so, yeah. I believe that to be the case, yeah, definitely. I mean, we could go back to Cloud Atlas and talk about 1,000,001 little observations that, either one of us have made about the film. But, it wouldn't necessarily give the average listener or, even, other listeners any better idea of what we're particularly talking about here and what we're trying to get across in this series of interviews. So, I mean, I think talking about the correlation, would be the most important and significant factor in this discussion today, because there's a lot to be said about the continuity of these films and the ideas that the Wachowskis are trying to get across in all of their films.
Now, if you were to say there's a main idea to any Wachowski film and throughout all of them, what would that idea be?
I would sum it up by saying subjugation of people, the freeing of slaves, the idea of revolution and evolution, and some kind of birth of a new age, usually done, well, in all of their three main films, which we discussed last time, being The Matrix, V for Vendetta, and The Cloud Atlas. Basically, the slaves being freed by a hero, a kind of a messianic hero figure of some description, who has gone through some kind of personal awakening experience and has become a kind of a rebel against the system, who leads the population, the slaves, to freedom.
Okay, so we have a rebellion, the theme of rebellion, and you've coined the term Wachowski Rebellion Religion, right? Is that the term to use here?
Well, yeah, it's like we said in the last, Wachowski Rebellion Religion, Wachowski Revolutionary Religion, whichever fits really, because it's the same thing, at the end of the day. It's the same set of ideas which are being promoted. They often will zone in on minority groups, on the average worker, on the average citizen, on any group or individual who's being subjugated in one way, and will play on that issue. And the movie will always end in that person being freed in some way through the actions of some kind of messianic figure.
Now, what about revolution, just revolution on its own? It's kind of a term that I feel has been misunderstood and even abused in our time, because so many things are revolutionary. People describe products as being revolutionary, things like that. So what do you say about sort of that bastardization of the term, if that sounds right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in all the Wachowski films, the idea of revolution is it's always global in reach. It's always global in its significance. In The Matrix, it's basically, humanity revolting against the machines, supposedly anyway. Of course, if you go into the high interpretations, it's actually quite the opposite. But we'll leave that for another discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
In V for Vendetta, you've got a similar scenario. Britain is supposedly the only, well, it's kind of presented to be the only functioning country left in the world, and so the revolution happens in Britain. And in Cloud Atlas, again, you're looking at a global revolution of some description that was instigated by a clone in future Korea. So yeah. It's always centered around the idea of one hero, one messiah, one special being leading us all to freedom. That is, and usually, for example, in Cloud Atlas, it's someone who you'd least expect. It's basically a clone, an automaton, a manufactured being who's not supposed to have any free will, ends up being the person that basically frees humanity and becomes a symbol for a new religion. And the same thing with Neo. He was basically just an office worker who was unplugged from the Matrix, went through his personal waking up experience, and somehow through superpowers, which again would take a long time to go into in terms of interpretation of the Matrix, but leads humanity to some kind of truce or some kind of revolution. And that's, in fact, the name of the final Matrix film was Matrix Revolutions.
Yeah, that's right. Revolutions. Yeah. That's
right. The people finally become supposedly free from control and pursuit of the machines. Of course, if you look deeper into the Matrix, and if you look at the word revolution, it's basically just one cycle. And as the architect in the Matrix explains, basically what happens is they create a hero to inspire people toward revolution, at which point they arrive back at the same point, the system updates itself, and they start from scratch again, which is, in fact, the definitive term of what revolution is. It's a cycle.
Yeah. Now, do you think there's any historical revolutions that tie into these films, like actual events?
There could be many. I mean, some people would, might even say, look at the Bolshevik Revolution and somehow tie it in. But I mean, the Bolshevik Revolution is a very controversial subject. Some people believe it to be a genuine revolt of the peasants against the capitalist monarchy of Russia. Whereas, other evidence points to the fact that it was in fact a Western-funded and basically Western-organized event due to create, another enemy for reasons, and also as a social experiment in Marxism.
Well, yeah. Well, if that interpretation were correct, it leads to the global aspect of revolution, and you're saying that the Wachowskis in particular have a global view on revolution. Is that so?
It seems to be the case because the Wachowskis themselves, one of them has had a sex change and is now we get back to terminology again here. I mean, he would prefer to be a woman, whereas I'm not so sure that he really is a woman because he was born a man, and so that's a whole other debate. And I think we could probably offend quite a few people if we went any further to that area. But I think, in terms of the idea of global revolution, is definitely something that is being suggested and sort of hinted at, and even quite blatantly promoted in some of their films. And this, of course, ties into the whole transhumanist, transgenderist idea as well, which is featured quite heavily in Cloud Atlas. The idea of the rebel movement called the Union, who want to free the clones so that the clones can, instead of being mindless automatons who are servant class, can integrate into society and be one with humanity. So it's the idea of freeing the slaves again.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about transhumanism and even transgenderism, postgenderism, all that stuff, those topics actually tie in together. People don't understand that they do. I would think, I would venture to say almost positively that the Wachowskis understand how those subjects connect. So it'd be my assumption that maybe they're playing to those themes and people don't even know it.
I believe so. I think the whole idea of the clone and the fact that one of them is also a now transgender person. I think those two particular facts definitely help to advance the idea of changing human nature, which is the core of transhumanism as a concept, supposedly improving the human being through science.
Yeah.
Again, it was basically, as you know very well yourself, a modern form of eugenics,
Yeah.
And I think that idea is played out in many of their films, especially in The Matrix and Cloud Atlas, although in different ways. So I think there's definite transhumanist spin in Cloud Atlas, and even more so in The Matrix, although in a different way.
Well, it's just how Aldous Huxley explained the ultimate revolution as one where, just basically the transhumanist idea that he described in his book, Brave New World. And he said this overtly.
Yeah.
So now we're getting beyond his novel, his fiction. We're getting more fiction in that regard, in that vein, talking about the same things now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole ton of movies that have come out over the last couple of years, and even more so now. Some of the ones that are just coming out now are dealing very, very much with eugenics in a very Huxleyan fashion. Even the most recent Superman film, I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen that, but I mean, that's there's a lot of Huxley in that.
Huh. I'll make a point to watch that, yeah. I would say that the Matrix film is quite obviously dealing with transhumanist topics when you get the uploading into computers and all that. It's blatantly obvious. Yeah. But certainly not so much in Cloud Atlas. It's subtle, as everything in this movie is. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, in the Matrix, the only way to beat the system is to actually plug yourself into the system, into the control system. So it's kind of a paradox right there, kind of conflict right there, and supposedly beating the system is becoming part of the system,
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, obviously that was brought out in the Matrix very heavily, whereas in Cloud Atlas, as you say, much more subtle. The themes are much more emotionally based. And that's one thing that I think is prominent throughout all of the Wachowski films, is that obviously there are different levels of interpretation, but for the average viewer that goes and sees The Matrix, they're not going to get the whole story. I mean, if you look at all the different facets of the story of The Matrix, it is quite complex. There are a lot of levels to it. V for Vendetta, not so much, although at the same time there's a great degree of continuity involved, and consequence, resulting in revolutions and all that stuff. But again, in Cloud Atlas, and I almost start to think sometimes that the Wachowskis and whoever is helping them write these scripts are deliberately making their films as obtuse and diffuse as they possibly can, in order to kind of disarm the critical faculties of the viewer, so that they basically come away with the emotional impact of the film rather than an intellectual one. So they basically identify with the main emotional theme of the film rather than try and figure it out on an intellectual level. And so I think definitely an element that's been included in all of their films in order to sort of promote the general sort of slightly new agey religion that's prominent throughout all of their films,
Yeah. Well, again, in the outside world, I'd say that's how actual revolutionaries work, is they kind of incite radical action in a large, oftentimes angry mob, and they use that to their advantage.
Yeah.
Again, I'm always wondering about the actual historical context and how one brings about revolution. Do you think that it's possible to actually spur revolutionary action through such things as film?
Yeah, I mean, it's always possible. It's just one of those things. I think it just has to be the right message conveyed in the right way by the right person in the right words at the right time to really get through to people. I think it's definitely possible, although history seems to show that most of the main revolutions haven't been so, and have been much more orchestrated and planned than history gives them credit for.
Yeah.
So, in terms of previous revolutions, I'm not so sure. In terms of the possibility of future revolutions, it's definitely a gray area. I think there are definitely possibilities there, but there's also the possibility for co-opting and subversion, and basically neutralizing whatever power any revolution might have, through, the work of, counterintelligence and through disinformation and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to the Wachowskis themselves, I know that they're certainly enigmatic figures, and they try to remain out of the spotlight, although it's nearly impossible for them to do completely now. What do you think about that them not wanting attention as far as they can get it, at least, and wanting to kind of remain in the background?
Yeah, I guess my guess would be that they're probably not wanting to reveal too much about themselves and their own beliefs, and the people who I assume they're working for. I don't know who those people are, but I think they're definitely connected to some high society people with certain esoteric beliefs, which the Wachowskis have in turn taken on themselves. And although they have made some public appearances, they seem to be quite sort of outgoing, kind of bubbly, open people. And I think perhaps, maybe, if they spent too much time in the spotlight, they might end up revealing a little bit too much about what they're trying to do. Yeah. So I mean, that could be an answer, but that's just a guess.
Now, of course, the secret society question. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with. Well, you're talking about revolution itself. It's been a product of secret societies to a great extent. If you look at all the European revolutions around the French Revolution and the American Revolution, I mean, quite obviously it was. So, is it fair to say that revolution and the revolutionary tradition itself just comes automatically with secret society attacked onto it, with ties to secret societies?
I wouldn't say automatically, although, when we look at history, it does seem to appear that the major revolutions have been, orchestrated by, secretive elements within, higher levels of society. So I don't think there necessarily need to be a direct connection there always. I think, that there may be instances in history where there was a genuine revolution that was, inspired by a genuine human being who wanted to change the world or change a system or a society or whatever it was. I think there has been the odd occasion when that has happened, although the consequences of those revolutions are to be questioned because we're still heading in a not very nice direction, to put it mildly. So I'm not sure how much impact those, if any of those revolutions were genuine, and were just simply, revolution by, the genuine inspiration of the human being and the human creativity. I don't know how much positive impact they've really had on society. Although that's something that, may require further study. I'm not sure.
Now, something very important to talk about here is the truth movement, or whatever it is. I always have difficulty explaining or giving a name to it. But the Wachowski films have become iconic within that community, within the truth community. I would have to say, how is this important, and how does it relate to the idea of revolution within the truth community too?
Well, as we've discussed, I think films like The Matrix and V, and maybe to a lesser extent Cloud Atlas, have been, very, very influential in terms of promoting the idea of mass revolution. I think, I'm just trying to find the right words here.
The truth movement itself, do you think the truth movement itself is a tool to bring about revolution? Do you think that could be the case?
I think it definitely will be the case in some circumstances, yes. Yes, definitely. I think more so, maybe not so much just in American context, maybe in a UK context as well. But the idea of, promoting and, sort of organizing an alternative community or an alternative demographic that is, based at its core, anti-establishment and its views, can definitely be used. The energy and the momentum that's created through those movements can definitely be used and channeled towards revolutions that serve, the the elite class rather than the people who are actually doing the work in the revolution, as has been the case in the past.
So creating a revolutionary movement and using the Truth Group is a distinct possibility, to say the least. We don't know really what's going on.
Yeah. If you just look at a film like V for Vendetta, that has spurred almost an entire movement, like the whole anonymous movement, where they're all wearing the Guy Fawkes masks,
Yeah.
That doesn't really, to me, there's not a lot of human creativity and human inspiration there. They've basically copied a Hollywood movie in the hopes of changing the world,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of hope there, to be honest with you. And most of Anonymous's actions have been centered around London as well, which is, of course, where V for Vendetta is set.
Yeah.
So it's literally. If there was ever a clear-cut case of predictive programming, I would say V for Vendetta and the Anonymous movement. And of course, Julian Assange is tied into all of that. He's almost like the V character in a way, the patriarch of that movement, exposing the globalist lies, and getting people to rally behind him to expose the truth and, revolt against the system. Of course, within authorized parameters, there's certain things you won't touch in order to make sure that any revolution and any momentum that is genuinely generated through those actions is channeled towards ends that will ultimately serve the goals of the ruling class in the end, as again has been the case with previous revolutions.
Yeah, well, I would say the fact that a revolutionary group just wears the masks shows that the film was successful in altering people's minds and behavior.
Well, yeah, it's given people a format and a template as to what a revolution could be, should be, and might be, and that fact has been very obvious in the film V for Vendetta and the resulting formation of the Anonymous group and all their activities. You even have some of the guys from Anonymous doing these little sort of like 2-minute YouTube clips where the Guy Fawkes mask give out all these threats against the government. We're going to hack your sites, we're going to bring you down, and blah blah blah, in exactly the same way as the V character did when he broke into ET Studios in V for Vendetta. So they're directly copying a Hollywood movie made by the culture industry, in the hopes of taking down the very system that has created film.
Yeah. Now, how does one sort of shield themselves from falling into this kind of behavior?
Well, I think groups can be useful in some ways. If you can get a group with an ideology and a common set of values that they want to stick with, I think a group can be useful for certain causes. But apart from that, I think it really is been the work of single individuals down through time that has had the most impact on the positive changes in the culture and positive changes in society, rather than group efforts. There's that old saying that I'm probably misquoting here slightly, but there was a quote by someone along the lines of the biggest changes in society have always come from small groups of dedicated individuals, not from any mass movements.
So when it comes to the film Cloud Atlas, what sort of revolutionary ideas might be in that film?
Oh, there's a lot of revolutionary ideas. You've got the idea of a revolution of clones against an oppressive regime which created them. The clones are being fed to themselves. Well, it's like the theme of Logan's Run, where you only live till 30, and then you supposedly ascend to the next level. The clones are given a similar religion, where they basically only live to whatever it is, 2025, and then they're supposedly, through their religion, ascend to the next level. In fact, it is that they're simply deactivated, liquefied, and fed back to the clones as protein. You've got that issue there.
Have the Wachowskis, have you seen any interviews with them about this film or read any interviews where they say something interesting and you pick up on it?
The only interview I've seen with Wachowskis on this film was they were just talking about the writing process. And it was them and the other director talking about the writing process, and they were just talking about the fact that it took them a year to do it, and they did it all off their own backs, and then eventually got a distribution deal with Warner Brothers. However, they came up with $100 million. I imagine they probably made that from their previous movies, but they financed it themselves. Yeah, in regards to the whole Wachowskis and what they actually are talking about in terms of the ideas they're trying to get across in their films, it's very simplistic. They don't seem to want to reveal much. They basically talk about the fact that they just want to make something that's genre-defying, boundary-defying, and basically beyond any sort of convention. And that is a very, very common theme, especially in films like Cloud Atlas, because you've got the idea of clones being, spurring a revolution to join with humanity and be one culture, one society. Whether you're a real flesh and blood human being or a manufactured clone, we're all one. So you've got the whole oneness idea of the New Age in there. Which also ties into transhumanism, of course, transgenderism, So those ideas are definitely prevalent in all of at least in Cloud Atlas, although they don't seem to really want to talk about it that much publicly, despite the fact that one of them has actually had a sex change and has become now a transgender individual. I think that speaks volumes about their own personal beliefs, regardless of what they say in their interviews.
Yeah. What I find fascinating is if we're talking about the movie, it always remains very generic, and it's like, oh, here's how we did the effects. Oh, we made the movie this way. They never get deep into the themes. And likewise, if you're talking about Lena Wachowski becoming Lena, it's always at a shallow level too. It's like it almost becomes like a protest against people who think that she wouldn't have the right to do so. And then I know one of the appearances where she actually says anything is her talking about that and like being angry that people wouldn't allow her to do it. But the conversation never goes beyond that. You know what I mean? The conversation's never deep.
No. It's always like for or against. It's always a dialectical conversation, as basically most popular arguments are. It's either you're for or against. If you're for it, you're a nice person, you're liberal, you're progressive, you want the best, you've got humanity's best interest at heart. And if you're against it in any way, or at least if you've got any questions about it in any way, you're an evil, repressive fascist, and you should be done away with, basically. Yeah. That's the kind of dialectical limits of the conversations that are generally held regarding those types of topics.
Do you think that is done on purpose?
Yeah, of course. If people actually stop to think about the logic and the basic biology involved, and male and female, and the purpose of reproduction, and the idea of the reproduction of the species being an essential element of our existence as human beings and our progeny in the future, people would start to ask some questions about the worthiness of actually changing our human nature into something that it naturally was not meant to be. And people can argue with me on that, but and it's a very touchy subject, and I'm not having a go at people who have made this decision to maybe become transgendered or get involved in the transhumanist side of things, but the argument is kept very, very, very simplistic on a deliberate level. To basically, it's like Democrat, Republican, Apple versus PC, blacks, whites, whatever. It's the same dialectical argument. Keep it simple, keep people divided, so that the real content of the argument never gets discussed. And the synthesis is reached.
To me, it should be obvious that the individual person gets to do what they want with themselves. So that's it's like a non-issue. But,
of course, yeah.
But the greater issue is lost. We're talking about reproduction, as you said, and nobody even thinks about that. Yeah. And that's regeneration itself is what transhumanism, that whole idea, is really all about at its core, and altering that. And it's just amazing to me how that gets glossed over all the time.
Yeah, well, obviously they went across it over because if people actually started to think about it, they'd come to some pretty obvious conclusions about the problems with transhumanism. And the transhumanist groups, which have a lot of lobbying power, don't want people to have that kind of discussion. All they want to do is really is promote the idea that transhumanism is the way forward. It's the way to improve the species. It's the way to improve our lives, our intellect, our abilities, and our capacity as human beings into the future. So, I mean, any discussion that goes beyond the for or against is actually detrimental to the transhumanist transgender cause. So those kinds of discussions are obviously going to be, censored and sidelined in the mainstream media.
Yeah. Now, I want to take back to the truth movement again, too, and maybe the attitude within the truth movement. Do you think there's any splits within the truth movement and how it feels about transhumanism, or is it pretty unified, or what can we say about that?
I think it depends on the level of the education of the person who has been doing the research, because the truth movement is such a wide spectrum of people with different beliefs, and different religions and different levels of awareness and research. I think for the most part we're beginning to see a lot more people beginning to question transhumanism than there were a few years ago, and I think that's mainly thanks to people like Alan Watt, who's done a fantastic amount of work on exposing, the real history of transhumanism and the people behind transhumanism and the esoteric end goals of transhumanism. So I think more and more people these days are beginning to, accept the idea that there needs to be some serious questions asked about this whole agenda and some serious discussions had about the idea of improving the species through technology. But, again, there's always going to be those few people out there who haven't quite maybe done the research or have maybe got certain, philosophical or ideological beliefs which make them, perhaps more prone to the idea of, improving the species through technology. So I think there's probably a wide spectrum there. I'd imagine most people have got some pretty serious questions and are quite willing to talk about it in a critical way. Whereas I think there's probably some people out there who maybe haven't investigated as much. And I can definitely think of a few people who consider themselves to be quite well educated, who obviously haven't done any research on transhumanism at all, and have basically, watched the Ray Kurzweil documentary and gone, "Oh wow, great, fantastic! We're going to be able to think like a supercomputer in 10 years' time. We'll live in a virtual reality. It's all going to be great. Wow, great! Let's go for it. Let's go, go, go! This is our road to freedom. This is our road out of tyranny. And that idea is subtly presented in films like Cloud Atlas and very, very directly presented in a film like The Matrix, where again they have to plug into the system and become transhumanists to actually fight the system.
Yeah. Well, again,
so yeah,
if we're talking about big movements in the truth movement, there, people will tend to want to think of it as one large organism. My last question was stated as such. So when you join a movement, for better or worse, you become part of a larger thing, and your ideas sometimes get made up for you just by subscribing to something.
Absolutely. I mean, you get that all the time. When you're trying to talk to the average person about something quite basic on maybe a basic geopolitical or socio-political level, you're automatically lumped in with a whole set of beliefs which you may not subscribe to, or you may have varying degrees of certain opinions on certain things which you've actually considered and thought out, and you basically just lumped in with the rest of them as being either for or against. All the Wachowski films are so deep and complex in so many different ways that we could go into any one aspect of any of those things and talk about it for hours. So it's kind of difficult to pick one particular aspect which is more important than the others. But I think one of the things that struck me most on a sort of more of a general kind of emotional level with a film like Cloud Atlas was the fact that I think the story was deliberately made to be overly complex.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a theory. I can't prove that that's the case, but I think to the average viewer, they made that story so complex that the critical reasoning part of the brain shuts, basically you stop trying to figure out the plot and you just enjoy the spectacle and the mystery and all the sort of general wishy-washy emotional messages which are basically new age in their kind of in their thinking. the kind of the oneness idea, the new religion idea, the new age idea, the idea of transhumanism, transgenderism to a degree, all sort of merging into one big mush. I think that idea was definitely, well, at least those concepts and themes were conveyed much more through emotion than anything else. And I think through the story, and in many ways, they made it overly complex, so as to kind of almost disable people from trying to figure out what was actually the message of the film, because there is no real one message of that film. It's basically a collage. It's like it's a tapestry, Yeah. It's an audio visual tapestry with no clear one message. But when you look at it as a whole, you come away with a certain emotional sense of what ideas and themes and feelings we're trying to get across. And I think those main ideas and feelings that were being put across in that film were to do with transhumanism, the idea of revolution, and the idea of oneness and a new religion and a new age.
Yeah. It's funny how confusion and revolution seem inevitably to go together. And you could say that confusion might even be a revolutionary tactic, you might be able to say.
Absolutely, I think so, yeah.
Now, just our time, generally speaking, like in which we live, I'd have to say that it's a confusing time to live, and therefore it is one in which revolutionary ideas will take hold. What do you think about that?
Very quickly, definitely. I mean, revolutionary rhetoric is growing by the day. Whether it be in your country, the US, or where I live in the UK, and the whole idea of revolution is becoming more and more popular as a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the social and political problems we face. You had that word bandied about a lot more, and of course, it's being promoted in a lot of films as well. Especially through science fiction. You've got science fiction films and science fiction TV shows that all deal with the idea of revolution of some sort or another, some kind of apocalyptic event where the masses of humanity either suffer some kind of catastrophe or either turn on the government in some way, and there's some kind of collapse, and humanity is sort of reborn into a new age. And I mean, there's even a show called Revolution.
Yeah, so, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, it's basically, I haven't watched it, but it seems to be almost a rip-off of the Hunger Games. That revolutionary rhetoric is definitely growing, and it can be used in a number of different ways. But, I mean, history shows that revolutionary momentum generally gets channeled back towards the same ends of the power groups that, have got certain agendas to push.
Yeah. Well, as in the film Cloud Atlas, you get kind of a destructive end, a fall to civilization. That's what revolution tends to do.
Well, that's right. I mean, in the film Cloud Atlas, Sonmi triggered, or at least inspired, a revolution. And shortly after, we had the fall, which was the fall of civilization. So you had a revolution, right? Humanity becomes one, and then you had basically an apocalypse where humanity is again divided in two and has to start from scratch again. Yeah. So I mean that idea is definitely presented.
Yeah, I really enjoy bringing it back to the truth movement again and again, just for obvious reasons, with everybody wearing the Guy Fawkes mask and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just it's so odd. I don't want to. Again, it's a love-hate relationship with me personally when it comes to like the truth movement, or almost anything. Almost anything I really like, I also am wary of it too.
Yeah, exactly the same. Exactly the same. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Can't help myself. That's just how it is.
Well, I mean, the truth movement needs to be critiqued, and I mean, it is critiqued by some people, but I don't think enough, and I don't think to the depth that it needs critiquing. I think people get swept along by certain ideas a bit too easily, and they get swept along by easy fixes and one-size-fits-all solutions, and the idea of mass awakenings and mass movements and mass rebellions and all that stuff. I think those ideas are very, very appealing to people, and I think they catch on very, very easily, because they obviously appeal to our hopes and our dreams for a better world, which we all most of us at least, in terms of the average person aspire to. And I think the Wachowski films definitely capitalize on those human desires in all of their films by presenting the idea that, again, it's basically a religious idea that some kind of Messiah can save us all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the religion aspect doesn't get understood. And again, people, I think, in this day and age like to criticize religion so much that they don't realize when they themselves have a religion.
Yeah. It's like atheists. They're the most religious people on the planet,
Yeah.
They have the most rigid doctrine and dogma of any of the religions,
Yeah.
And yet they consider themselves to be non-religious,
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Dawkins is a perfect example, and do not even get me started on that guy. I mean, let's move on right now. But I mean, the whole idea of capitalizing on the human aspirations for a better world, a more peaceful world, a world free of war, a world free of subjugation, a world free of slavery and destitution and poverty and sadness. These are all things we aspire to. And these films from the Wachowski brothers definitely capitalize on all of those aspirations and those dreams, but with a certain twist and with certain agendas playing into them, giving people what I believe a lot of the time are false hopes regarding what the solution to the human predicament is. In terms of ideas like transhumanism, the advancement of the species through technological means being the solution to all of our problems, or the idea of, a patriarch or a messiah being the answer to all of our problems, or a system or an ideology that is being presented to us through Hollywood being the answer to all of our problems. Those ideas are always advanced and promoted in all of the Wachowski films in one way or another, to one level or degree to another. And I think they're very successful at doing that. And I think whether people realize it or not, those films have had a huge impact on people's expectations regarding what's possible in terms of changing the system.
Yeah.
What expectations we can have, what's realistic, how we can play this whole thing out. And I think people can end up with much more of a naive impression of how complex and well coordinated this agenda and this system can be in many of its facets. I think the whole thing gets oversimplified to basically, masters and slaves, and all we need to do is revolt against the masters because there's more of us than there are of them.
Mm-hmm.
And either a messiah or technology or some kind of fix all, solve all problem is going to be the solution to it. And that again is very appealing to people, and I think that's why these films have been very popular. And, I think that's why the Wachowskis are the way they are, and, working with whoever they're working with.
Yeah, well, they're smart. The Wachowskis are smart, and therefore they know how to make things happen. The way you make things happen is you make a huge, big-budget movie that people are going to pay attention to. So you've got people's attention immediately. It's a big-budget Hollywood movie. Then you insert your ideas in there, and that's the technique. So the power of fiction, people discount it, and they just think it's entertainment. But to those who do understand this process obviously works, might it be possible that the little guy could do the same thing? We don't have access to Hollywood, and we don't really want to.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because that's the kind of theme that Cloud Atlas brings up, is that it's almost in contradiction to the view of the vast majority of the truth movement. And, I kind of subscribe to this view myself in a lot of ways, in that, there's certain power groups who have much more influence than anybody else, and have got immense amounts of power to coordinate agendas right across the board. However, in the Wachowski films, it's always presented as being basically the old idea of a few bad apples,
Yeah.
And the idea that, there's more of us than there are of them. All we need to do is just rise up against them, and that's it. the sun will rise tomorrow morning, we'll have a brand new world, and everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it gives people a sort of a naive impression and it gives them an oversimplistic sort of view of how complex the system is and of all the agendas that are being played out. It basically reduces it down to its most base level of just, slavery versus freedom, and breaking free of that slavery through the channels and the means and the mediums that they suggest, i.e. technology and religion. Mm-hmm. Religion in its new age sense rather than conventional orthodox sense, that is.
Yeah. Well, no matter what, there's no way getting around it. When you're living in the world and you're understanding how it works, you understand that you have to get your hands dirty and do something, and that becomes the whole question. And it's like, okay, well, what do I actually do? And that's what it's all about. And one would do well to understand that there's a lot of answers to that question given to you at all angles. So it's good to keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to wrap up, I guess it'd be good to tell viewers to maybe watch the film Cloud Atlas again, and with all these ideas that we brought up here today in mind, and maybe they'll have an interesting viewing experience then. Yeah.
Because there's kind of two ways you can watch it. You can watch it purely for entertainment purposes, where you're just looking at the spectacle and all the emotive themes that are being presented to you, and all the human factors. Love, death, life, reincarnation. Loyalty, trust. All of these human virtues and mores and values. Are being presented to you in a very kind of. Well, I guess it's more of a subtle kind of emotional way. Or you can view the film through an analytical eye, which takes a lot of work and will take at least 2 or 3 sittings. And even then, you're probably only going to scratch the surface. So again, there's so many different ways of looking at this film in terms of what you want to get out of it. But there's a lot to be revealed and a lot to be understood if you're one of these people who's willing to sit down with a notepad and really, really analyze the film. But I think the intention with Cloud Atlas was to make a film that was overly complex, which people didn't really understand. The intricacies of all the different connections, and basically came away with some sort of more general, emotionally based ideas about the world and about what humanity is and about where we're going, and sort of almost subconsciously accepted those. Which is often, the whole point of predictive programming in films, which I believe there is a degree of in this film.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that's so important. If you can actually remain thinking and remain critical while watching any movie, it doesn't matter what movie it is, then you actually end up taking so much more from it.
Definitely.
And you really get empowered. You don't get empowered by just taking in the subconsciously whatever themes they put in there. You actually think about it, and that's what people need to be doing if they're able to.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when a film is presented with a lot of emotional content, it goes straight to the heart. It goes straight to our most basic desires and fears and aspirations. And for that reason, it often shuts down our critical faculties, and we don't take in a lot of the more analytical aspects of the film, at least on a conscious level. And so it's very easy to influence people's minds through emotion, to get them to identify with a character, to get them to identify with the concepts of the film. And for that reason, they're not going to be thinking critically. And so basically they're almost by osmosis absorbing the kind of more esoteric ideas that are being presented in the film and accepting them as possibilities, and basically preparing their minds for, future agendas, which certain groups that have no doubt been involved in films like Cloud Atlas witches bring about.
So there you have it, everybody. Don't be a numbskull. Put your thinking cap on and watch a movie.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of films coming out that deal with a lot of these concepts. You know, at the moment there's a new one just come out called Elysium, which I haven't seen. Did you watch the trailer? Did I send you?
I haven't even done that yet. No, I need to.
Well, yeah, definitely watch a trailer for that. A friend of mine has seen it and said it is absolutely mind-blowing in terms of its predictive programming element. We're seeing a kind of a resurgence of basically like 70s sci-fi themes like Arthur C. Clarke and even a bit of H.G. Wells and Huxley, like combined with modern sci-fi CGI and modern sci-fi ideas like transhumanism. So there's almost like a new breed or a new genre of science fiction coming out, which is very, very interesting and deals with all of the themes we've been talking about tonight. So if people have got a critical mind and they're able to watch a film and criticize it and analyze it for what it is rather than getting swept up with the emotional content of the film, then yeah, definitely there's a lot to be taken in the films that are coming out at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and you're being told a lot about what's going to be happening in the future as well.
Yes, pay attention, listeners.
Yeah.
And well, I just want to say it's been a great show. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for being here, Adam.
Not a problem. It's been a pleasure, as always, Aaron.
Thank you very much for listening to Trans Resistor Radio. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something from it. I hope you go out there and critically watch films now. If you're not already doing so, you probably are, but if you're not, please do that. And you can check out Adam's YouTube channel. I'll put a link to that on theageoftransitions.com. So, of course, go to theageoftransitions.com. Check out our sponsors, proxbn.com, and again, the banners to Amazon on theageoftransitions.com. Remember those. And for an in-depth look at transhumanism, check out my book, Revolve Man's Scientific Rise to Godhead. Please share this podcast with others, subscribe, and I will see you next time on the next episode of Trans Resistor Radio.